Welcome back, everybody, into Bill's Chat. I am Josh McCarty. With me, as always, is Luka. Luka, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. It's good to be back. We've obviously been busy away from the mic and stuff. Apologies to anyone that's been waiting for something like that. And we normally have a fun time doing all these individual, what you call it, draft prospect, insight episodes, what overviews, whatnot. But sitting here right now, doing good. We're recording on a Sunday afternoon. I can't wait to then just sit down and watch the rest of the Masters as it closes out. No, it's I'm glad that the seasons are changing. We're getting into the warmer time of the year, Josh. And then on top of it, Sabres playoff hockey's right around the corner. And how can one complain about much these days right now? I don't know, because things are good. Things are very, very good.
Things are good. We were actually talking a second ago. We're both kind of fighting off colds. I have a thing going on in my throat where every so often I need to take a drink of water. So hopefully those don't pop up. Luka, you mentioned it. And I'm kind of a glass half full kind of guy that due to life circumstances, we didn't have the last couple episodes where we were going to do, an offensive focus episode and then a defensive focus episode and then kind of like our final thoughts leading up to the draft. But my glass half full take is now we're going to basically give you a one-stop shop about all the prime prospects that we not only think the Bills could be really looking at 26, or if they were to trade back into the second round, but it's with equal information. If we had done a wide receiver episode 2 weeks ago, we wouldn't know who the Bills had hosted on top 30 visits. We wouldn't know any lingering thoughts about how guys moved up or down the board. So I do think that it's going to be a longer episode for sure. Maybe a throwback to some of our old Bills chat days. But if you are behind on your draft coverage, this is the show you want to listen to, because this is not only going to give you an idea of what this draft is all about, but is going to do so with a Bills focus, how these players fit into the Bills, what we think the Bills could be thinking at each position group. And before we get going, Luka, we probably should mention the tweet you sent out about the special announcement on draft night, what we have going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So as always, draft season is one of our, if not our most favorite season of the year, or time of the year. And we've done it now, what will be we've done it 3 times, and what will now be the 4th time, our 4th annual Draft Night Live Show Spectacular. We are a go green lit for that Thursday night. I believe that is April 23rd. Just shooting that off the top of my head. I'm pretty certain on that one. April 23rd, we go live always 15 minutes before the draft starts. We also do sneak in a little bit of draft coverage on our live stream. Don't want the NFL to hear that. And we then like to do a live watch along. We've had some noteworthy moments. We've had some lackluster ones. You never know what the draft is going to be. That's why it's some of the best live television that can be produced these days. Some might say it's the only version of true live television that exists these days. But we're excited as always. It's always a fun time. My office becomes a hot box by the end of the night, but we cannot wait to just be doing the thing that we love most, and that is watching the draft alongside anyone who is welcome to come join us and watch along, comment, talk about what favorite pizza Josh likes to eat, all the fun stuff that happens. I can't wait. I'm glad we're able to do it once again, and I hope that we are able to do it every year for the foreseeable future.
And I am planning on getting pizza that night. I'm back to my dieting phase where I'm counting calories and stuff, but I already know draft night I'm getting pizza. That is an end goal. It's my motivation every day, as I have the same boring breakfast and lunch until then. Luka, let's talk about this draft class. And before we get into specific position groups, just this draft class as a whole. My first thought is, boy, oh boy, am I glad this is not one of those years like the many during the drought where the Bills needed a quarterback, because it sure does feel like you'd have to force it this year, where next year it just feels like the prospects are going to be a lot sexier. But my second thought about this draft class is, I think because it lacks the sizzle at the top and maybe the sizzle that really gets you excited to have the 26th pick, I do think there is a lot of depth in this class at positions the Bills need. So my overarching thought before we get into the nuts and bolts of this draft is, if the Bills play it right, I do think they can address 2, 3, or 4 needs even without having a second round pick, if they guess the runs right, if they pick a receiver at the right time, and maybe not at the beginning of a run, but at the end of a run, get a same quality player, or same thing for edge rusher or linebacker. This is one of those drafts where the opportunity is there to really set yourself up nicely for the future, even though I don't think the day after the draft, you're going to feel like, man, we got a future Hall of Famer.
This is it's beyond Bills too. I think this is a pretty much NFL wide situation where this draft has some guys it's sprinkled in there. It feels one that has the potential to be the most random as well, especially in the first round. But it is one where you are truly doing what the draft is meant to do. You are doing things for the future. You are not doing and making decisions purely based on the focus of now, or even with a heavy thought process and as to immediate needs and things to address in the now. There will be teams and things that fall perfectly for them. You know, you get your Reuben Baines and your Jeremiah Loves and stuff like that, where they end up getting something that will facilitate a now need as well as the future need going forward, hopefully for those teams. But especially for the Bills and really anyone drafting outside the top 10, this draft and the prospect pool and everything like that, when you really dive into it, feels like one where I don't want to say underwhelmed by your pick, because there are going to be quality picks and you'll get great value depending on where you are and so on and so forth. The Bills could be in that situation, but you're not going to have that true like home run feeling leaving the first round of the draft, I believe, just because a lot of these guys, there's enough question marks. I'm not going to say concerns because it's not concerns, but it's just enough there with a lot of these individuals in this year's draft where they can develop into a quality player, but it doesn't feel like day one that's what you're ultimately going to get. And then from there, I will say, I almost have an expectation, Josh, and I will say this. It feels like any year you go into a draft where the prospect pool feels underwhelming and you're not sure who fits where and where it ends up and all that kind of stuff. It almost is like those drafts a lot of times set up for a lot more surprises, of course, naturally, because you're not expecting things from a lot of individuals. This draft does have a lot of what I would call surprise candidates in it, in my opinion, where right now, sitting here in early April, we're looking at them and we're like, well, this guy seems like he's good here, but I could easily understand if then a lot of these individuals will flip the script in a quicker fashion than expected and be able to develop quicker just because those expectations are lower. And that honestly gets me a little bit more excited in the sense of, depending on how the board breaks down, depending on what happens for the Bills at 26 or wherever else they end up, it's almost where that individual will not have nearly as much expectation as you have had for anyone in the past. And I even include the likes of like a Dalton Kincaid or a Max Harrison and things like that, where it's like, oh, we got this guy. That's going to be a great tool to bring in. Can't wait to see everything he does in camp, stuff like that. You're always going to have that about new picks. But there was almost a level of expectation on top of that, where then if injury problems came up, especially like Max Harrison, it leads to a massive disappointment. Whereas an individual like this, whatever it is, how we feel now feels like you're almost going to have a much more grounded expectation of these individuals. And then if they are to develop quicker than usual or show a lot more flash in their first camp than you expect, the surprise confidence nature you might have in a first round prospect this year is going to be greater than your other years, just because the pool sets up a little bit on the more disappointing side going into this year's draft compared to most others of recent.
All right, well, let's get into it. I'm going to say something that I think is probably going to blow your mind. We didn't talk about it before the show. I'm interested to see your reaction, and I'm being dead serious when I say this. You know what position I'm really thinking about at pick 26? Quarterback. You want me to explain?
Go for it.
The expectation is Fernando Mendoza is going to be the first pick in the draft, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not expecting the Bills to take a quarterback, nor would I want them to. But I think the way this draft goes, that by the time we get to pick 26, my preference is going to be to trade back. And what you could have with teams picking at the top of the second round, like the Jets, like the Cardinals. I know Cleveland's picking in the 30s. Teams that maybe have an arms race to get up there and get that second quarterback, whether it's Ty Simpson or Drew Aller or Newsmeyer, whoever. Teams want to get that quarterback in the first round because then you get the fifth-year option on them. And I think this is one of those years where we will see a quarterback go early and then there will be a long wait for quarterbacks. And that could be a sweet spot to really maximize value on that 26th pick. So I think as the draft goes on. Now, look, if there's a run on quarterbacks and 3 or 4 quarterbacks go before pick 26, that's also fantastic for the Bills because that's pushing players down to them. But if we get to 26 and only one quarterback is off the board, that could potentially set up Luka for a seller's market.
Yeah, as soon as you said it, I laughed because, of course, it's funny, but at the same time, I instantly understood the thought process. Yes, the Bills are in a position where it feels as if the best case scenario almost does feel trade down worthy, and from there, I mean, Orlovsky's beating the drum at Ty Simpson being a first round capable quarterback, even potentially someone that he believes to be better than national champion winner Fernando Mendoza, who did everything possible to win that championship for little old IU. So you can understand where I stand on that one. It sure isn't that Ty Simpson's better than Fernando, but I digress. There are teams that are falling in love with a Ty Simpson. One of those does seem to be those little Cardinals out there in the desert. That feels like a great situation for them if Bean's on the phone just kind of seeing what's up, or maybe they are the ones, the Cardinals that is, pressing just, hey, okay, this team's at 28, this team's at 26. Are you willing to trade down? What would it take? So on and so forth. If you're Bean and you're seeing the board break down the way it is, and you're not going to break your rule, your almighty rule of we have 11, we have 13, we have whatever first round prospects, and we will only take those individuals, which I would imagine Bean will stick to that since he's been doing it for so long as it is. That's a marriage made in heaven right there. That's exactly what you want. You have someone that's willing to pay whatever the cost is to move up into that spot, and you are going to move back and not feel like you overreached for someone that is unnecessary at 26 just because you were stuck there. So it is definitely on the thought, but at the same time, it will be intriguing to see. You know what's going to suck is, Josh, on draft night while we're live, you know, someone's got, I don't know who's at 24. I don't have the board in front of me. I should probably pull that up. I will shortly.
24 is Cleveland.
Yeah, Cleveland. Someone all of a sudden moves up to Cleveland because they want to take Ty Simpson, and now we're sitting there like, oh shit. Who's going to move up now for anything? Because realistically and just logically, the number one position anyone would be willing to aggressively move up for would be a quarterback. So, yeah, it's definitely on the thought process. And as you said, it's not for the sake of the Bills taking one, but then again, it's for all of those teams that still need to find that quarterback and or created the need to find a quarterback that now could potentially find themselves where, hey, we don't want to wait until next year where you have what feels like a good class of quarterback, but then you're going to be in an arms race to get in position to get one. Whereas now you might be able to, for quote unquote, a bargain, go get a Ty Simpson that could still potentially be, in your eyes, just as capable of some of the guys next year, that you're not going to sit there and wait a year and you know, kill off a year of everyone else on your roster to do so. So yeah, I mean, the thought makes sense. It's funny to say the Bills are going to be looking at the quarterback prospects at pick 26, but it's not for themselves, as you said, and anyone should understand that. Of course, it's more so, hey, Arizona, New York, whoever, would you love to take one here at 26? Because we are absolutely open to selling our pick to you to move down.
I am so excited to pull the clip that from this show and post it on social media and YouTube and TikTok and says why I'm thinking about the quarterback at pick 26 and just see who doesn't watch the clip and just reacts. That's one of my favorite things. We don't do a lot of clickbait here, but that'll be fun. All right, let's start with receiver, Luka. I think that even after the DJ Moore trade, because of the way last season ended, because of all the drama around what Brandon Beane said on WGR after the draft, I still think wide receiver is first and foremost on everybody's mind. This wide receiver class in general, I don't think, I feel pretty good about saying I don't see like a Jamar Chase in here where there's a surefire number one wide receiver and there's just no warts in his game and you feel like this is a bona fide top 5 pick. How do you look at this wide receiver class? And I guess before, and in your answer, how many of these wide receivers do you feel confident will 100% be picked way before the Bills could even consider them?
I like the caveat of that last question because, of course, you know, I'm expecting locked first round. You to say locked to not be there for the Bills. That is a nice little caveat. So first and foremost, this receiver class has I'll call it a thin tier feel to it. And what I mean by that is in a normal tier circumstance, tier one could be, 1, 2 guys, stuff like that. Maybe if you wanted to stretch for 3 some years, it makes sense. Tier two, you'd probably see another 2, 3, maybe even 4 guys, so on and so forth, right? Like your tiers ever expand, and it feels as if, you get to tier 4 and you've already named, let's call it 12 to 15 receivers. This year, to me, there are 2 bona fide number one tier ones. There are, I want to probably put it at 2. I could maybe convince myself to say 3 tier 2s. And then tier 3 as well is only about 2 guys. I just don't see the high ceilings as much as you normally do with a wide receiver group going into the draft. And that's the thing. Like, I'm not necessarily talking about, I don't see as many first round guys. I don't see as many first, second round guys, things like that. It's just the ceilings don't seem to exist there. And that's, to me, something that's very important when you're drafting in general, is you always have to consider, what can this player potentially develop into at best? What can this player truly, if you are to put them in the best position possible and you are able to get all their switches to flip and they figure it out in the NFL and you're getting them to click on all cylinders, what is the best potential possible for this prospect? That is the high ceiling. What does that look like? There's guys year after year where you could probably say they are, potential stars, or let's say like just 10 plus year career guys. That's a high ceiling individual. You would probably number that in the 10 to 15 range. And that's, you estimating for surprises like your Puka Nakuas or whatever else, your day 3 guys that end up blowing up and stuff because, the stars align for them. But this year, I struggle to get to double digits with that. And that is, I am saying that as in, there will be guys we do not expect, of course, that blow up. That's always what happens. You can only project what you know, and you don't know shit, all layman's terms, going into a draft. People can surprise you all the time. This year, though, I would say, to be out of the reach, bona fide out of the reach for the Bills, I would say that there are 2 guys. There are 2 guys that absolutely 1000% will not be there. And I will also say this. I think the 2 individuals that I will name are not the 2 individuals in Josh's head, or maybe they are and he understands, but it is not involving Jordan Tyson. And that's just because some question marks that are out there lingering. Have your question marks, NFL. I welcome it. It is Mekhi Lemon and Carnell Tate. I think those are the 2 individuals that I would say are probably, let's call it 1 to 5 odds that they will not be there for the Bills at 26. They won't even break the top 20, or they won't even get past 20. I think Carnell Tate is expected, in my opinion, to go top 10, maybe top 12, we'll call it, because the Dolphins, I believe, are at 11, and they're one that feels like they're going to go for a swing at that pick. And then Mekhi Lemon also feels like another individual that I'd be surprised if he goes past, I want to say it's 14 was a number that I have in the top of my head as a receiver pick. I always find it funny every year in the draft, Josh. I memorize almost more about the pick number of what to watch.
Maybe 15, because that's where Tampa is. That feels like his floor.
Yeah, Tampa's a good one too. Although Tampa, I mean, at what point do you stop taking first round receivers? But hey,
lost Evans.
Yeah, that is a good point. But at the same time, you did invest in Igbuka, and then you still got everything else there. But hopefully McMillan's healthy for them. Anyways, those are the 2 individuals though that I cannot for the life of me seeing go past 20 at worst. And then for there, it's just they're not in the thought process for the Bills. I think it's interesting for Tate too. Tate feels like he's almost gone up due to the fact that he's the one with the least amount of questions throughout this entire process. He has not shifted for what he is exactly what he is. You're getting exactly what you're getting. And for what it's worth, that's a great quality to have as an NFL prospect. It's the reason that I said Emeka Egbuka last year was the guy I liked the most, because I thought he had a good ceiling to him, but also he felt the most NFL ready, and exactly what you're getting out of him. And well, we saw exactly what he was. So I think Carnell Tate has thrived because, Mekhi Lemon started down a little bit, then he shot up, and I think he's staying up in that top spot. I think Jordan Tyson going into the end of the season was probably viewed as the top wide receiver prospect, and he's fallen just due to his inability to participate in drills and activities, both at the combine and at his pro day. And then question marks are starting to flare up on if these are greater lingering issues, and he has an injury history, although I think there's some caveats to that personally. In college, and then your Casey Conception, your Denzel Boston, your Amari Cooper, those guys have kind of fluxed up and down as to where they should fall and end up and things like that. And Chris Bell for that matter as well. I didn't name him. He has kind of this polarizing thing about him that it's Carnell Tate's the steady Eddie of the draft class. And then Mekhi Lemon, I think to me is an individual that there's a lot of teams that are going to fall in love with certain things about his game that ultimately he will not land outside the top 12, top 15 as well. So those are really the only two. I think Jordan Tyson, even as great and as high ceiling as he is, I think there is a reality where he could be in play for the Bills past 2021, 22. Is it at 26 exactly? I'm not sure. Casey Conception and everyone else ladder, though, I think will absolutely be in play at 26 for them. So it's just going to all depend on the draft board and who likes who come the day of.
Yeah, so I agree with the two you named, and I think we also are in lockstep. Those aren't our top two. Tate is my one, and I don't love Tate, but I think you hit the thing with him is he's the one that has a ceiling and a high floor, where like with Jordan Tyson, his ceiling is phenomenal, but you have to consider the floor because of those injury concerns that would be fair to have, although you and I think are pretty aligned on they're not as concerning as maybe people are making them out to be. And then Mekhi Lemon might be the direct opposite, where his floor is really, really high, but I'm not sure what his ceiling is. I mean, tell me what play caller he winds up with. If he gets to Sean McVay or Kevin O'Connell, maybe I feel really good about it. But, if he just goes to, Brian Dable, I don't know that Mekhi Lemon is ever going to see his full potential. Carnell Tate, I don't know what to do with him because as great as it all looked, he was always the number 2 in that offense with Jeremiah Smith. So, are we looking at somebody who is Devonta Smith in the NFL? Where like it can be fantastic if there's somebody else drawing coverage, but if not, he's not really somebody. I don't know. I don't know how you could know, but that's maybe the only question mark there. Mekhi Lemon, I heard a great term from Connor Rogers about him that I never really thought about, but now I love it. He's called it a slot clogger. And what that means is, and the name he used for that is Josh Downs, where during the draft process, you're looking at a player like Josh Downs, you're like, man, he could really dominate out of the slot, but that's really the only place he can play in the NFL. But what that actually does is it limits your offense. Because when you have a player like that who can only play in the slot, it reduces your ability to move a Michael Pittman or an Alec Pierce around the formation in Josh Downs' case. So if you were to draft a Mekhi Lemon, then, Khalil Shakir is specifically an outside receiver at that point in time. You don't get the opportunity to move Keon Coleman to the slot where you and I both think is his best chance of actually reaching his potential in the NFL. And you really can't move DJ Moore all over the formation. So I like that term slot clogger. I don't want a slot only player. I don't think the Bills will have the appetite to do that anyway, but we don't have to spend a whole lot of time on Mekhi Lemon and Carnell Tate. Jordan Tyson. And this is where I will basically tell you what I'm thinking about this wide receiver class. If Jordan Tyson is there at 26 or 20, 21, 22, go get him. He instantly upgrade your offense today and instantly upgrade your offense for the next 10 years. Perfect. Fantastic. I feel great about him. Outside of that, I would be more in favor of taking a different position at 26. And that's every other name on the board. I know Casey Conception's a name that a lot of Bills fans like. Omar Cooper, which, man, if the Bills draft him, I'm going to have so much trouble saying Omari Cooper versus Omar Cooper. Same thing with Denzel Boston. David Boston always wants to come out of my mouth.
Yep.
Outside of that, I think you could get similar bang for your buck by going with in the third round or trading back into the second round, getting someone like a Jeremy Bernard from Alabama, a Chris Bell, a Zachariah Branch, a Chris Brazil. I think those type of names, while aren't as sexy as a Casey Conception or an Omar Cooper, I think would be maybe a smaller drop off versus taking an edge or a linebacker or a safety at 26. And that probably says more about what I think about Conception and Cooper than it does necessarily about the Brazils and the branches of this world. And before I kick it back to you, the 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 third name. So, obviously if Tate fell to 26, great. If Makai Lemon falls to 26, I think I'd be okay with it just because the value would feel outstanding, even though I don't love the player. I don't expect that to happen. Jordan Tyson falls within range of the Bills, who is my second best receiver in this class. Get him. Do what it takes to get him. The fourth name, I guess, there would be for me Denzel Boston. And I know there's a segment of Bills fans, and I get it, that you hear that and you're like, oh, God, not another big bodied receiver. It's Kelvin Benjamin. It's Keon Coleman all over again. I think there's more to his game than that. I think he's much more polished as a receiver than Keon Coleman was. I think he's more fluid. I think he has better hands than Keon Coleman, significantly so. I think he has better body control. I just think he's a better all-around receiver than Keon Coleman. So if Denzel Boston was the pick at 26, I would get it. I wouldn't love it. I would get it. That to me is where my receiver conversation is. We talked about it off the air. If it's Casey Conception, if it's Omar Cooper, I'd be happy the Bills did the thing that we wanted them to do, which is take a wide receiver. But I wouldn't love the player they were getting, and I think I would just differ from the public reaction on them. So that's my laid out wide receiver plan. As much as we've been driving the wide receiver train on this podcast, I don't feel the need to force it at 26 unless really Jordan Tyson falls within a range that the Bills can go up and get him.
Yeah, the discussion is as simple as this. We are some of the individuals who have been the broken record year after year after year about talking about go swing for a big time receiver in the first round. Go make it happen. Do what you can to make it happen. You need to stock the cupboard with a young, talented receiver that's first round capable in order to make things happen. The problem you have now this year where it feels like it maybe the issue is rearing its ugly head to the point that could cause that itch to be needed to fill and be scratched is the guys just don't exist nearly as much as it feels like they used to in recent year drafts. So Tyson's the only bona fide, personal bias aside, he is the only one I would be over the moon excited about if
what
the
Bills
were to
land. Are you talking about?
Yeah. We wouldn't be able to do our draft pick wrap up because I would be sitting there trying to find the draft jersey of his and all that stuff. But he would be the individual that I'd be over the moon excited about. Think that based on all these years where we've been asking for it, finally they did the thing and they got the big time playmaker for at the wide receiver position that can come in and finally make that impact both in the now at some level, but also be doing it for years to come and hopefully develop into a greater problem for all defenses around the league that aren't the Buffalo Bills. After that, it's like, can I be okay with some of these guys there if they were to do it? Certainly. We'll recap and I'll be like, I'll be watching them with a close eye when it comes to your Conception. I will put Omar Cooper in there and I will maybe put Denzel. I'm not nearly as okay with Denzel Boston. I wouldn't say I'm as negative as some of the individuals out there with Denzel Boston, but at the same time, I'm definitely not in love with him. He's not my brand of receiver, and that's a very generalistic thing. I don't care for receivers generally of his make and model, we'll call it. It's just, there's something about his game that it just doesn't do it for me. But ultimately, I think those three names, it would be, do I feel like they needed to do it at 26? No. Am I unhappy about it? Like to the level of being pissed off? Also, no. We'll see what happens. And then I'll be very intrigued for what it's worth, what they do in the third round. Because of course they don't have their second round pick. So it's like, what do they do in the third round that is going to now compensate for them taking what feels like a little bit of a reach there at 26 or whatever it is to fill that receiver cupboard and get a guy that they believe to be first round capable or worthy at the receiver position now. It's like, hey, you still have other things you need to fill for the future and stuff. And there's positions we will be talking about that make a lot of sense in the third round that it's like, that will be where my focus shifts immediately. And it won't be like, hey, day 2, because they got Jordan Tyson, I don't give a shit. I think we got an A+ draft. It's just, that is kind of the situation of the position to where they are picking. It's the reality of it is they're not the Chiefs picking at 9, where they'll pretty much have their pick of the litter at the receiver position for the most part, or at least of the high end caliber picks that they will have. They found themselves down in that area where they can do whatever they feel like doing. The Bills are in a position where you're going to have to, accept the board for what it is. And I just don't see the receiver this year that makes a whole lot of sense outside of potentially one guy in your 20s where you will be picking. So it's an unfortunate thing. Like, I just want to say, like, there are guys here that come day 2, early day 3, whatever, that I like, and I will be intrigued by them also being a Bill if that were to come. But it's just disappointing that finally it feels like the universal understanding is there, and potentially even in-house, as to, hey, we need to get more skillful and get more quality players at the receiver position. And now we're going into a draft where, in all reality, it's not good enough for you to do that with a blue chip item. And that sucks, because there's been year after year after year previously where it felt like there were guys potentially you could have done that with, and the only thing you left there with was trading back twice and ultimately getting Keon Coleman, which isn't working out.
Yeah, Keon Coleman not working out. And then I just think that puts the Bills in a position where they have to find a way to add something to the pipeline, even if it's not in the first round. Let's talk about some of those names we like in the later rounds here. And one name I like is Zachariah Branch. I think he's somebody that could be available to the Bills in the third round. He is the son of Cliff Branch, which is a former wide receiver in the NFL. He is fast as all get out. He runs a 4.3. He's electric with the ball in his hands. I think his upside to me is Zay Flowers with maybe even more of a high gear. The concern on him is his weight is in the 170s, and you just wonder if a player like that's going to be a gadget player. I'll give you a couple more other names that I like at wide receiver in the second or third round. I think Ted Hurst out of Georgia State checks a lot of boxes from what you want from a speed, from an ability standpoint, but just having played at Georgia State, you just don't know what it's going to look like when he lines up against NFL caliber cornerbacks. You don't know that for any of these guys, but at least if somebody had lined up against Alabama or Georgia, you can feel like, okay, they went against the best of the best in college football. It's such a projection out of that school. And then another name that I think is pretty popular, maybe was more popular a couple months ago and has kind of faded a little bit, is Chris Brazell out of Tennessee. And before I say anything, I want to say how much I hate watching Tennessee wide receivers. I had the same problem with Jalen Hyatt. There's just so little of what they do that actually translate to the NFL. They line up such a wide split. And I'm so torn on Brazil because I've heard the Randy Moss comps, which, come on. But I get what they're saying. He's such a long strider, and he doesn't have to be such a technician with his route running because his speed will scare you. I think that's true. He does kind of remind me, and I think Chris Sims said this too, of another Chris. Now, this is a couple decades ago. Chris Henry, big, fast, good jump ball receiver, not necessarily a physical receiver. I think there's stuff to his game that I really like. And I'm not as concerned about him not getting off the press because I don't think they pressed him a lot in college because they were scared to death of his speed. So I think he could at least be fun and maybe, just maybe, become a very scary weapon for you. And those are the kind of guys I'd rather roll the dice on in round 3 versus taking an Omar Cooper or a Casey Conception in round 1, because I don't think the gap is that big. Who are some of the day 2, early day 3 prospects that jump out to you?
So I will say we share a brain, just first and foremost, because I don't want to name the same guys. Zachariah Branch, I think I even told you after our, like, where we were like, hey, we're shifting to the draft. And I named a couple guys like, hey, Josh, you're going to want to check out maybe this guy. Zachariah Branch was one of those names. I was like, this guy's a little energy bug, fast as hell, twitchy, would be a fun, unique addition to the Bills that we share a brain on that. I will say, so I have a lot of guys that I would say, for the most part, you're going to be looking at day 3. And the reason I'm going there is This is also what I expect the Bills to be doing and more focused on. I will be over the moon if they take Tyson and that works out. But in reality, do I think that's what it's going to be? And we'll get to that shortly. No, they don't have a second round pick. So now it feels like you're going to have to start quote unquote bargain shopping for your receivers. These are guys that I think in the picks that they have and what they're going to try to do and navigate through the waters where they stand. These are guys that intrigue me. I will say they all have one thing in common. They're all sub 4.4 guys, but that's also for a reason. We need guys like that. So, first and foremost, I will say one guy who I got to watch firsthand ruined my life in the fall when Arizona State went to Mississippi State. And instantly, he was already on my radar, but he just continued to be on it. And everyone's aware of him now, especially because I believe he was the fastest 40 time in the combine. Brennan Thompson, the guy can do one thing at an elite level, and that is run straight. Can he do other stuff? Yes. I want to preface that. He was used at Mississippi State for what it felt like two things, and he did it incredible to the point where it was very frustrating to watch if you were playing against him. He could, as long as you got him the ball in space, like on quick screens and stuff, something Joe Brady we know loves, he would be able to navigate space and then house it within 4 or 5 steps. But then also he could run by any defender in front of him, especially if you're not jamming him up and such. But he was even capable of getting around a jam from time to time. The problem with him is outside of that speed, measurables leave you desiring a lot more. He's not the shortest individual. He's listed as 5'9", but hands, arm length, weight, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, he's 165 pounds wet. That is very, very light. I mean, that also helps you, run 4.26. But again, it's one of those things where would he be able to withstand everything that's needed at the NFL level right out the gate? Probably not. But if we're a team that craves speed, elite speed on the offensive side that threatens things, he would be an individual. And it feels like he's going to be a guy that you're seeing float around the third round, that if the Bills are looking to do something, that's something to be had. Another guy out of Georgia Tech is Eric Rivers. Eric Rivers is an individual that intrigues the hell out of me for the sense of he's not tall and big, but he plays a little bit bigger than what he is. He's a playmaking guy. He also, I know I said Georgia Tech, but I believe he came out of FIU and then transferred to Georgia Tech. And when you watched his FIU tape from a couple years ago, you're like, oh, even with a little bit lesser competition, he's a full rounded wide receiver, feel like more. And then when he went to Georgia Tech, he was just excelling at the things that he does best. And of course, Georgia Tech had a very good year, and he was a key component of that. Again, sub 4.40. I mean, he actually has some jump to him as well, though. He can go up and get things. His athleticism when it comes to straight line speed, as well as just the ability to get off the ground and do things, because you have two things in that metric, your vert and your broad. His broad jump was 127 centimeters. That's 85th percentile. There's things about his measurables where you're like, yeah, this is a guy who's not just like a straight line speed individual. He actually has some game to him. And then you watch his tape on top of it, and it feels like he can do some stuff for you. And the comp I have for him, not that I'm a comp guy, but he's got that Marvin Mims like feel to him. And if you are an individual who sat there saying, hey, could we get Marvin Mims off the hands of the Broncos? Here's an alternate solution for you, because realistically, you're looking at early day 3 for an individual like him. Last but not least, though, is another early to mid day 3 guy. And I will just say this guy is green lights all over the measurables, it feels like. And it's just funny to me because he was on a good team. And there's a lot about him that's nice. And for whatever reason, I think there's just other things you need to work on, and he's going to be a future project. But at the same time, I think he could find fun splash plays like he did in college as well, that it's like inserting him into this receiver room would be great. Caleb Douglas out of Texas Tech. You have an individual who can run sub 4.4, who is also 6'4", over 200 pounds, has massive hands at over 10 inches, has a good wingspan to him, broad jump of, again, 126 centimeters, putting him above 85 percentile, and his wingspan is over 85 percentile. There's just so much about him measurably that then you look at his tape. Does he have some, we'll call it, issues when it comes to, it's not drop issues, it's just can't make the big catches? Yes, things like that. It's one of those things where I wonder if you're able to get him comfortable, you're able to do things, and he has all those measurables. If something can flip on a day 3 guy, we're talking day 3 here, you can get a connection to work between him and Josh Allen. You could find lightning in a bottle, and he can absolutely be an effective player. You're buying guys in day 3 based on their ceiling potential, and he's an individual that has all the things that you can't coach, and therefore you need to just try to work on the things that you could hopefully coach into being better, being, essentially getting at contested balls more, making sure balls don't hit the ground as much as they did with him, but also he didn't have Josh Allen throwing the ball. So that's one of those things where I like everything about his measurables, and let's just see what he can do. You're looking at him in the 5th, 6th round. That's what you're doing with a guy of his talents. So, or lack thereof. I don't want to say it like that, but again, we're talking day 3 picks here. Those are 3 individuals I had circled. On top of it all, I do like Jacoby Lane out of USC. He's a guy that you're probably looking at the 3rd round, that ultimately it's like, again, it's someone that has good size to him. It seems like he's actually really nice when it comes to contested balls and stuff like that, but you're not spending a premier pick for him in my eyes. You're getting him probably more at that value back end round 3 situation. He might move up to early 3. I've seen some stuff out there that believe teams are going to be looking at him in that late 2, early 3. You don't take him there. He feels like a kind of guy, if you can get him at value in the back end of the 3, it would make a lot of sense, because now it's someone that's fallen into your lap that feels good. And the last name real quick, again, as a late 3rd, Bryce Lance out of North Dakota State. Didn't play the competition that you would like to see him play, of course, but he feels like yet another potential. Why am I blanking on his name right now? Mini Megatron out of Green Bay. Why am I blanking? Oh, apologies. But anyways, he just feels like another size, speed, potential to be a big playmaker at the NFL. You just wonder if the competition level was not quite there, if that's going to translate to success in the NFL. But again, deep threat through the roof. He can also work the intermediate side of the field. He's got potential to be a very quality player. It's just you need to develop him a little bit more against the skill level that he's going to be up against in the NFL, because it's going to be a big jump from where he came from. But overall, I like him a lot. There's a lot of guys, just to wrap it up before I kick it back, there's a lot of guys that I think you can get good value for, but none of these individuals, may I add and have the caveat of, you're reaching up to go get at whatever pick and area you're going. These are names you have on the board of, hey, if we're at pick, X, do not move above X to then go get this guy. It just feels like they are a quality individual that'll feel like a good quality pick that you got value for at your current position, not an individual you are going up for and feel as if you need to go and hunt these guys based on where you're currently sitting.
The name Green Bay you were thinking of was Christian Watson. I put it to
thank you. I felt brutal too, because we love Christian Watson here, but I was like, why am I blanking at this moment in time?
It just happens. It happens sometimes. So I think the point you should take away from the wide receiver discussion is, if you're like us and you're still very thirsty for a wide receiver upgrade from the Bills, 1, don't forget they got DJ Moore. 2, I think it's okay if they don't take one in the 1st round, because there'll still be some exciting traits they can draft late. Luka named several guys that, blew away the 40-yard dash, and some guys that have some good skill sets. Zachariah Branch is the guy we both see eye to eye on. Chris Brazil would be interesting in the 3rd round. Mm-hmm. But I think my fear would be if they took one in the 1st round that wasn't a Tyson and wasn't a Tate, that it would be hoping versus actually taking the value. And that's not something I want the Bills to do. One position that I think is gaining steam for the Bills, and I only think we really need to talk about one player there, and it's defensive tackle, Caden McDonald from Ohio State. Mm-hmm. Now, if you have other defensive tackles you want to bring up with the 1st pick, that's fine. And then we'll get to some other position groups. But Peter Schrager did his mock draft recently. He's largely thought of as like the most accurate mock drafter as far as like the insiders go. And he put Caden McDonald to the Bills. I think from the standpoint of defensive tackle, when you look at what the Bills have done recently in the draft, it's Deion Walker was a smash hit. TJ Sanders is a 2nd-round player they still have a lot of belief in. They still have Ed Oliver on their roster, and they took Dwayne Carter in the 2nd round 2 years ago. So I don't necessarily think that the Bills have the appetite to go out and get like a defensive tackle that's going to penetrate the pocket. I didn't think that they have the guys in house that can do that. But the one missing piece from this defense that I think a lot of us still think that they could use is a true nose tackle. That's kind of an old school way of looking at football, especially, this day and age where like we're going to stop the run first. And it kind of goes against everything Sean McDermott defense has tried to do. But Luka, the one argument you can make for Caden McDonald is he might be really good, but he could legitimately make everybody else around him better. You're not forcing Deion Walker to play a position that's not natural to him despite his size. He could be more of a pass rusher at a 5 technique in a wider split. He can rush the passer more versus try to just 2-gap take on blockers. You have linebackers like Terrell Bernard and Dorian Williams and whoever else they draft at some point kept clean because he's keeping offensive linemen off of them. And it just helps the entire defense. And when you look at what Ohio State put out there defensively, so much of that went to him. The credit he got for making the whole thing go. Obviously, nobody's going to do handstands and backflips about a defensive tackle that's a run stopper in the first round. But I think if we sat here on draft night and Caden McDonald was the pick for the Bills, it wouldn't take me long to be like, I get it. What do you think about that idea?
How do I say this? I think the idea of him slotting everyone else where they need to be appropriately is absolutely the thing I will hang my hat on as the reason I like it. Because outside of that, that's where I start to get frustrated with, hey, you spent pick 26 for a throwback, nose tackle. I think there's better ways to go about it. And I mean that as in like there's multiple ways to go about it that feel better. And I just don't see where Caden McDonald at 26 makes a whole lot of sense. I think if your idea behind it all is we do truly need that, gap eater up the middle that's going to cause teams to abandon the run game by halftime. Like just, hey, this guy's just eating up space left and right. We can't be doing this. It's just not working because between him up the middle and then putting everyone else where they are, Deion Walker, Ed Oliver, so on and so forth, it's frustrating for those teams. Great. Can you not go potentially find that elsewhere for a much cheaper thing on a 1-year deal, things like that? Nose tackle feels like a position that you can sit on if you find value on it potentially later in the draft that it works. Great. Can you find it potentially in free agency? Yes. Great. That's one where I don't need my space eater to happen at 26. I'd rather it happen at 126. Like I don't understand where the value could truly be preached as to why that's what made sense at 26. It just, he's not an individual where beyond being a throwback, true space eating nose tackle that I can be like, he's excelling at this, and it's call it what it is. If you're drafting someone in the first round, if you're using a blue chip asset, they better be good on the defensive line for what it's, for what I'm saying here. They better be competent, good, capable to rush the passer. That's it. It's one of the most, if not the most important attribute to any defensive lineman out there. And that's obviously not his game. And I'm not saying that he needs to be that individual to be useful in the NFL. It's just, I think when it comes to picking at 26, you need to be capable of doing that. And there's nothing about his game that tells you that's what it's about and what he will ever become is something that's reliable or capable of rushing the passer. That's just not what he is as a player. So I scratch my head wondering why that would make sense, other than the fact of you're filling an immediate need to then slot everyone else where they are. And once again, that's also not what you do in the draft and what should be on the forefront of your mind when thinking a prospect makes sense in the early stages of the draft.
See, I like the way you laid that out because everything I said about needing a nose tackle to help in the run game and take pressure off of Deion Walker, that is something you should be able to get in the later rounds. Maybe a Lee Hunter out of Texas Tech, maybe a Daryl Jackson Jr. out of Florida State, who does seem to be kind of like a 2-down only defensive tackle. I think we kind of see defensive tackle similarly, where unless the value just jumps off the board for the Bills, like from a pass rusher defensive tackle, I think the Bills are probably going to move forward with what they have in house, where really the one piece they probably need to add at some point is a big nose tackle, and it does feel like you can probably do that on day 2 or even day 3 and get somebody pretty effective for the resource you spend. All right, Luka. Well, if we think that wide receiver might be a little longer shot than we thought, several months ago, we just talked about defensive tackle. Gun to head, what position would you predict right now the Bills pick at pick 26? Because that'll determine where we go next.
Gun to head, not that I ever want that to be the case. I would imagine where I stand, that understanding where the prospects are and kind of how I feel it and the vibe of the Bills and so on and so forth, feels like edge, pass rush, that kind of situation, especially with a scheme change and such, and the players that could potentially be available for you in the 20s. That has the feeling to me as if where I would lean currently right now we are recording this on April 12th. That is where I stand as to what the Bills will be doing at 26.
So this is a very good edge class. And unlike a lot of positions in this class, it has some very high level sex appeal at the top. You have Arvell Reese, David Bailey, Reuben Bain, all of which you could see going the top 10 of various mocks that you see, as high as 2 overall to the Jets. All those guys are going to be out of the Bills' range for sure. What the Bills have done at edge is they brought in Bradley Chubb. They did lose AJ Epinesa, and they lost who else did they lose at edge last year? Oh, Joey Bosa. Such a forgetful season for him. They still have Greg Rousseau on roster too, and they will be getting back Michael Hoyt at some point in time. So after that, when we're talking about pick 26, do you have a favorite name of the edge rushers at pick 26? And is there a certain style that you're looking for?
Yeah. So favorite name is Cassius Howell. I feel like I've already mentioned him before on this pod previously. Not this exact episode, but others. But the style really is as that true 3-4 outside linebacker pass rush capable individual. And he essentially feels like someone that you can mold into that Bonito-like position that the Broncos were using, that Leonard's now coming over, and of course will have the philosophy similar to. He doesn't blow you away with a lot of things other than his speed, but his pass rush ability jumps off the tape. I think there's a lot to love about what he brings to the pass rush, and it feels like he's an individual that I would call him similar to like I can never say his name, but I can visualize it right now. The former LSU guy, Alu Ajulari. BJ
Ojulari.
Yeah, thank you. He's very much similar to him, it feels like, coming out of college, where it's like not the biggest of individual, not the longest of arms, things like that, but based on his speed, bendability, and the capabilities that he has at getting to the pass rush from that true edge position at that outside linebacker stage, the wide split. I think there's a lot to love about him. The way he rushes is almost violent looking, especially with the speed that he has. That first step is incredible. He understands how to rush the passer, and he does such a great job at reading the pass pro and understanding what's needed off the snap to get to the passer, that I think he could potentially at 26 add a dynamic to this team that will get it moving in the right direction, both in the now and the future, especially as we continue this kind of this change from the McDermott way on defense year after year into now what we're going to be getting with Jim Leonard, and moving forward with what we need to fill the needs of his philosophical ways on the defensive side of the ball. That he's kind of the highlighted name I have when it comes to keep an eye on, understand what he does, things like that. I don't think he's the only option for what it's worth, but it just feels like, based on where they're picking, what makes a lot of sense, it's him that I kind of am intrigued by the most for the Bills to be taking at 26.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think he's a very good player. I think he could be in conversation for the Bills at 26. One guy that I think is going to be polarizing was actually Reuben Bain's running mate at Alabama, and there's several things to dislike about him. One, I remember when I'm trying to think, it was Clay Matthews and Ray Maluga And then there was another really great USC linebacker. Like they all play at the same time. And you were just like, okay, not all these guys can be great. Somebody has to be just like taking advantage of the fact they're playing next to somebody great. And when you look at Ruben Bain, you're like, okay, well, his running mate's going to benefit a lot from not getting a lot of attention. And then you also look at the fact that the guy I'm going to talk to you about is 25 years old already. And I just always wonder about the guy who's 25 years old dominating 19-year-olds in college. And, what do you really want to draft a first round pick for somebody who's going to be almost 30 by the time that his contract comes up? But Akeem Mesidor from Miami, he plays like his hair is on fire. 100 miles an hour every single down, just a nonstop disruptor. And maybe that's the perfect fit for somebody opposite Ruben Bain, who's going to be drawing the double teams and all those things. But I think he's at least interesting for the Bills. What I couldn't find in this class, though, and I'll give you a chance to talk about him. He high effort explosion, plays like his hair's on fire, all that stuff. But I couldn't find somebody that I liked that was the same like size and prototype as Nick Bonito. And that's what I was trying to look for because he's more of like that 6'2", 6'3", 240. And I couldn't find the perfect match for that. But I do think Mesidor is probably a better trade back, top of the second round, grab him and also get some other picks. Outside of that, another guy I like who I'm not sure if he'd be there for the Bills is Keldrick Falk. Very athletic player, 21 years old, but he's kind of more of that ball of clay where you might need a year or two to really refine him and get him to the point you want him to get to. But that's where you look at, he'll be playing behind Rousseau and behind Chubb. If you can take somebody with the first round pick and be patient with him, which is not always easy to do, you might 2 or 3 years from now really be onto something as far as your top end pass rusher. Those are a couple names that stood out to me. I also do like Zion Young out of Mizzou. I'm not as high on him as others. I think he'd be a solid pick for the Bills, but I'm not sure like what specific role he'd fill. And I am kind of picky when it comes to edge because I think the Bills are in fine shape with Rousseau and Chubb, but what they lack is that true edge bender, that true like, and these guys are hard to find, bend the edge with the ability to get low on offensive tackles and really win with speed rush. And I don't know that I know the Bills don't have that. And that can be hard to find, particularly in the back end of the draft. Any other names you like down there for edge, or if it's not in first round that you like on day 2?
Yeah, I mean, so I will say this. The other individual that kind of floats around there at 26 is TJ Parker out of Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't fit the idea that I think they would want out of that true edge. I think that he leaves you desiring more from that when it comes to winning a foot race, to the edge and get that bend and stuff. I think he is a good player. Don't get me wrong. I just don't think at 26, and for whatever it's worth, he could be gone by 26 as well. I think there are going to be teams that like a lot about his game. It's just the reason I bring up Cassius Howell is I just believe his ceiling is greater. And as you said, do I think he's an exact match as Bonito? No, but I would say he's probably the closest to it when it comes to this draft. That's why I have him highlighted and circled. And if you were to gun to my head, ask me, a lot of guns to heads. If you were to ask me Cassius Howell or TJ Parker, I would absolutely go with Cassius Howell just because I think the potential is greater when it comes to his game for that role. Another individual, though, that feels similar-ish to me and potentially can provide that speed you're looking for from that outside linebacker edge position and such is Malachi Lawrence out of UCF. I think he has that vibe and feel to him as well. I think he's definitely a pass rush specialist style guy. He jumps off the page. He's got that first step and burst. He also at the combine had an incredible 40 time. It was a 4.52. Great speed to his game, but he also matched that up with a 130 broad and a 40 jump vert, which are also very, very top tier athleticism things. So there's a lot of athletic freakness like potential to him. But he's got the reason the things I look for in a speed rusher is, hey, is he just beating guys with his first step and just getting around that edge time after time? And it's kind of like that one lane kind of pass rusher at college, which you can succeed at, especially if you're, I mean, UCF's in the Big 12, respect to the Big 12, shout out. But, you're not beating SEC tackles time after time doing that. And you can do that, though, with lesser competition. It's like, no, he has other stuff where you can see him winning both with a combination of his speed, but then also he's going for chops, swipes, rips, things of that nature to then get to the quarterback as quickly as possible. He is a dog and is relentless with that. It's just he also leaves you lacking, or he leaves you wanting a lot more in pretty much every other part of his game. That is, he is a pass rush guy now. Can you potentially mold him into being a little bit more of what I will call a responsible edge player? Absolutely. I mean, that's coaching. That's what it comes down to. But I think he has the measurables and the tenacity and the things you want as a pass rusher, that from that outside linebacker edge rush position, he checks a lot of boxes that, you're talking about getting an individual like this too, potentially in the third round, depending on how the board falls. I think right now he's projected late second at this moment in time. That it's like, of course, without a second round pick, you can't do that right now. But then again, he's an individual I circle because I think he fits a mold they're looking for. And if you were to move back into the second round, depending on how the board's playing out, maybe he's an individual they will also have circled, and they will shift around the board to acquire assets to then make it make sense for an individual like him. He's the only individual I kind of really have there. What's weird about this draft class, Josh, I will say at the edge spot, or we'll call it the rush spot, just because I think in my head, I really truly am focused on that outside linebacker 3-4 edge style. There's not a lot of those guys. There really aren't. Ironically enough, Josh, there's a lot of 4-3 traditional edge players where if we were, let's say, in the McDermott defense, I'd be like, this guy could check that box, this guy could check that box, so on and so forth. But I think what you said, just to finish this point, is so perfect. I think we're okay at edge. So if you're going to take one of these guys, which there are guys to like, it needs to make sense as to an exact fit of what you're looking for. You're not just drafting another Rousseau, Javon Solomon, all of those individuals. You're not out there going to get another AJ Epinesa to make that work. It's like I think they need to truly focus on, and I believe they will be focused on finding that more specialized 3-4 outside linebacker edge style that can hopefully add a dynamic of speed and quickness, as well as utility to it, that a traditional D end doesn't necessarily bring to the table, because they have guys who can fill that traditional D end role. And they have quality guys who can play that position. So I think they just need to be a little bit more specific with it. I would say there's probably, I'm looking at my list here. The problem I have is I just don't think the speed is quite there like you would like it to be. But overall, I would say another, like, let's call it a third round guy, is an Anthony Lucas out of USC. I will say this. I was surprised at how many USC guys I circled. I was like, I could talk myself into not normally a USC individual. One, he's young. He's projected to be a third round guy. And I think he's got that. First off, he's got the height and stuff like that. But also on top of it, he's got a little bit of he's got a little bit of a wiggle to his game that feels like he might be able to develop into something. The problem is, I would say what I have listed here is, ironically enough, the one thing that feels like it's lacking is that first step. But also he's a smaller framed individual for his size, that maybe there's something in there that you can turn him into that utility outside linebacker guy, that you make it work within the scheme that it fits. But ultimately, yeah, I like the idea of edge. We talked about edge, and I think that's mainly due to the certain individual I believe checks boxes and makes a lot of sense for them at 26. But ultimately, if you're looking for value later on, there's another reason I like it at 26, and that is, prime example, not a lot else that leaves me wanting it third, fourth, fifth round, and feel like maybe you could potentially throw a dart at that individual and find some gold to fill that role.
Edge is also historically kind of like offensive tackle, one of those positions where usually the best guys in the league are guys that were taken early in the draft. Like, you get the outliers who were taken on day 3 that blossom into superstars, but for the most part, those guys are pretty easy to spot. One guy I like as maybe a day 3 shot in the dark, or day 2 shot in the dark if the Bills don't go edge in the first round, is Keiron Crawford out of Auburn. He did play next to Keldrick Falk, so you do have to worry about the same thing where the guy who was next to him got most of the attention. But I like the fact that he does have that athletic twitchiness. I like the fact that he is a pass rusher first, maybe would need some refinement in the running game, maybe a third down specialist for the Bills, but also in that Auburn defense has some experience dropping into coverage too. So maybe that's something the Bills could utilize as they want to be more multiple with their defensive front. Luka, I'm getting to the point where I feel like edge and linebacker are really like the two positions I'm thinking most about for the Bills. Now, linebacker, off-ball linebacker is never my favorite idea in the first round. But when you look at what the Bills have, you look at what the Bills lost. Shaq Thompson and Matt Milano out the door. Terrell Bernard coming off of a very disappointing injury-plagued season. Dorian Williams in-house. Joe Andreessen on the roster. No moves made yet. You can make a real strong argument that linebacker is by far the biggest need on this team. Do you have any favorite ideas for linebacker at pick 26?
At pick 26, absolutely not. Not unless anything absolutely crazy occurs where you have, I mean, in reality, there's only two guys that are probably going to be first round guys, and that being Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles. And neither of those individuals are going to be coming anywhere close to the Bills at 26. That, barring anything crazy, they're not going to get these individuals. So, unfortunately, it doesn't feel like the off-ball linebacker thing is something they could even realistically entertain at 26. If off-ball linebackers on the forefront of their mind, that feels like then the primary objective truly will be, hey, we're shopping our pick. We're hoping someone's going to move up for Ty Simpson, as we talked about early into the episode, and we're going to be able to then get our guy, such as CJ Allen, for instance, early parts of second round, and justify and make it make sense because you acquired both assets and also took a guy appropriately for his value rather than reaching at 26 just because it felt like it filled the first primary need you need for the future at the position that is off-ball linebacker.
Yeah, and really one of the variables here is something we just don't have access to is how healthy is Terrell Bernard?
Yeah.
Was 2025 an anomaly where he just couldn't get that foot right? Or was this is a situation where this is who he is, and then the Bills are desperately in need for linebacker? You mentioned, I'm trying to get my notes up, and they're going very slowly here, which is kind of frustrating. You mentioned the linebacker CJ Allen. I think he's a popular idea, the linebacker out of Georgia. I don't know that I'm with you. I wouldn't love it at pick 26, but he's one of those like jack of all trades, masters of none. But Georgia, you like the fact that he played against good competition. I think he's an instant starter for this team. And I feel like his bust factor is very low. It's just hard to imagine that him ever becoming like the best linebacker in the league. It would feel like the Bills were aiming for a double instead of a home run there, which is fine. You get a double. But one of our biggest frustrations with this Bills roster is they have so many B to B plus players outside of Josh Allen, who are the A plus players on this roster. And that's where you and I were so excited about the Maxwell Hairston pick last year, because that's a swing for an A plus. And I just feel like when you look at CJ Allen, I don't have to be right about this. Nobody knows. It just feels like you're settling for a double up the gap. And, that's fine. But I feel like the Bills have a lot of CJ Allens at different positions that they need to take a bigger swing. And that's where I look at somebody like the linebacker out of Cincinnati, Jake Gulday. Now, I don't know that he would be somebody you would take at pick 26. That would feel kind of rich. But you want to talk about athletic upside. This is a guy that on the Cincinnati Bearcats defense, he played nickel corner. He can play safety with his athletic skill set. Let me get his size up from the pro day. 6'4" and 5'8", 236 pounds. By the way, I always laugh when the pro day numbers, like for height and hand and arm length, come in bigger at the pro day than the combine. Like what kind of special measuring tape you're using at the pro day?
Yeah.
But ridiculous athleticism. And this is a guy that he is kind of a ball of clay. But the one thing he really didn't do in college, Luka, was play that Mike linebacker position that the Bills need to figure out if he can play. So it's kind of a projection. you'd feel good about it, but you'd have to basically learn on the job in the NFL, which seems a little less than ideal.
Just a bit, if we're talking about something that we need here, and it's like, hey, we're going to draft this guy because we hope we can completely shift his mindset and philosophy to fill that need. One, you're drafting day 2, so you're hopefully doing it with the mindset of he's not going to be an immediate impact, and we are hopeful that we can develop him into what we want him to be. But yeah, he's not an idea, in my opinion, at all at 26. He's what you're looking at, in the 3rd round, or depending on how you've shifted your picks in the 2nd round, to make that happen. I will say, I thought I would be more in love with the idea of Jacob Rodriguez as a day 2 guy. What I will say is, I think the problem I have with Jacob, and I love Jacob Rodriguez. Let me just start with that. The reason I wanted to love him, and I think I was in love early on, is because I just love the player. The problem I have is I think his weaknesses are matching that of everything they already have on this roster currently. And if you're just adding another individual who struggles with coverage behind him and understanding his depth of requirement, and over pursues runs a lot and gets overwhelmed with that, while also being incapable of getting off blocks just due to physical limitations and or ability to get off blocks, it's like, does that not sound like everyone else we have at off ball linebacker right now? It's like over pursues, incapable of shedding blocks, doesn't understand depth assignments in the pass game. It's like, we don't need to necessarily be looking at someone like that. If they took him, I would just hope that those tendencies would go away, because he also feels like an incredibly smart individual at linebacker. He's a beast of a player when he's on. In his playoff game against who was it, Miami? I think Texas Tech had to play. He was an absolute monster, even though Texas Tech was outplayed and outclassed in that game. That I do like him, and it's not like I would be upset if they took him. What I will say, though, is an individual I do like on day 2 is Anthony Hill Jr. Anthony Hill Jr. out of Texas, I think, is someone that we're needing 2 things out of our off-ball linebackers the most. We're needing an individual who can get around from point A to point B quick, while also having an incredible ability to tackle and defend the run. I just named everything that Anthony Hill Jr. is phenomenal at. That is what he is as an off-ball linebacker. He has good enough size to be capable and possible to do everything you need, and also still very, very quick. I just think he does overrun at times, but it's not something that I would say is as noted, in my opinion, as the other individuals, even such as Rodriguez I just talked about. The only thing that's unique about him, or difficult to wrap their head around, he's not a 26 guy for this reason, because like I said, I think he's quick enough that if he was a little bit more refined and developed, that he would be a 1st round guy. I think he just struggles with the intricacies of the game a little bit, and also, as quick as he is not great in man coverage and stuff of that nature, that if they were to continue down a path of wanting man coverage, you're not going to overwhelmingly trust him early on. But I would like to hope that an individual with his abilities, you can just then develop and hopefully get them to understand the game better. And later on down the road, which is what you are projecting for with draft picks, he would be a little bit better and more smooth sailing in that regard. The only other individual I kind of had circled here, though, too, as an off-ball linebacker, honestly, ironically enough, is another Arizona State player, but Kayshawn Elliott. I think he's a day 3 guy, first and foremost. We're talking day 3 now. We've shifted there. Kayshawn Elliott, I will say, is the kind of individual where it's like measurables and stuff like that doesn't really blow you away and whatnot. But then you watch his tape and it just feels like he's the epitome of a responsible linebacker. He is always in the place you need him to be. He's also someone that always seemed his name is being called later in games. You're recognizing his abilities and capabilities down the stretch when you truly need plays. And he's not getting overwhelmed when it comes to just the run game and stuff like that. He's the kind of guy that I think, if you're looking to add just someone that understands the little things at the line and can make the stuff work, and you just need to get him up to speed at the NFL level, he's an individual that I would say he is great pre-snap and he understands what he needs to do. And then from there, you just need to get them going as to the next level. This is what we need you. And I think you'd be able to pick that up quicker than your average day 3 guy. That I like him a lot, and I like his game. That he feels like he would be someone I would be intrigued by on day 3. And then just another kind of dart throw name. I mean, everyone's familiar with it, but I would be absolutely fascinated if the hometown product, Red Murdoch, ended up as a Bill, because he just feels like an off-ball linebacker you're getting late day 3 that could actually, for what it's worth, mold into someone you need at that position as well. And I mean, he's just a fun guy and stuff overall. It's just the ideas of off-ball linebacker. It's harder to tell for me, and I'll just be fully transparent. We have no idea what they're going to be doing with this position moving forward. That's the hardest part about this. So I think there's a lot of guys that I like, but then I'm not even going to sit here and say that I like them for the Bills, because ultimately I'm just looking at players I like. And that's just truly because I don't know what we're going to be doing with that position moving forward, that it's hard to tell if this guy truly is, because that's very important for these individuals. Are they a traditional, Will in a 4-3? Are they a traditional, Mike in a 3-4? Like, what are these guys? Are they they're not a Mike inside linebacker in a 3-4? Like, what do we need truly here, and what are the Bills planning to do with this position that makes it difficult for that? So honestly, I just went and looked for guys I just liked, and I'll be curious to see if the Bills share that thought and are moving forward with that, because that would, to me, be something that will indicate more so what they expect from that position going into next season and for future years.
It is hard to tell. One guy I really like, out of Missouri, Josiah Trotter. Now, this would be an indication that their view on linebacker has dramatically shifted since the Sean McDermott era, because this is a guy that plays downhill first, and he is a stick of dynamite against the run. You feel him every time he makes a tackle. A lot of the same ways that, you felt Shaq Thompson out there, where he'd make a tackle, but also like it just felt like he hurt the ball carrier. And some of that is absent from the game of the NFL in 2026 anyway. But he needs to, develop some coverage skills. But this is a guy that I wouldn't love him in the first round at all. We're talking second, third, fourth round here. Probably third. Like, you go somewhere else, you get him in the third round. I'd predict he's the Bills team captain in 2 years. He's one of those guys that's going to lead with energy as well, and a super hardworking guy, but just needs to develop that coverage ability, but instantly upgrade your run defending game in ways that we haven't seen Bills linebackers do in years. And he has been on a top 30 visit with the Bills. Another guy who's been on a top 30 visit with the Bills is a, day 3 prospect out of TCU, Caleb Elarms, or another just super physical, better athlete than Trotter, good in coverage, but just he didn't start playing tackle football till his senior year in high school, and hasn't been playing linebacker for more than a couple years. So still very raw at the position, but infectious personality, leads by example, played all the kick coverages. This is a guy that is going to come in, immediately help you on specials, and maybe in a year or two develop into a very high impact player, maybe even a starter on your defense. So just some names to keep in mind, depending on what the Bills want to do. Luka, I know we are, as we record here on April 12th, putting this episode out on April 13th, we only have a week and a half till the draft, but I still feel like it would not stun me at all if the Bills went out and signed someone like a Jermaine Pratt prior to the draft, just because it feels like the way their roster sets up right now, and keep in mind, Matt Milano and Shaq Thompson are still available. The Bills just desperately need numbers at that position, and you don't want to go into the draft desperate anywhere.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where we talk about and we preach that you do not draft for immediate needs. And linebacker screams the most needed position come training camp. Like, it's the one where one injury could essentially be the most detrimental to what you're trying to do moving forward. So that's one where I 1000% agree that from this moment in time, while we are recording, while you are listening to draft night when we are live, it would be little surprise if we heard Shaq Thompson was signed, or they did that elsewhere. I you don't want to put yourself in a position where that thought creeps into your head as you're trying to decide who you're taking in the third round, who you're taking in the fourth round. Because also, these guys you're taking in the third round, fourth round, fifth round, or seventh round, like a Murdoch, those are guys that early on, the best case scenario is they're contributing on special teams and maybe in specialized rotational situations. Like that's what those guys are doing in the immediate. And you can't have that as being like, hey, that's your number 3. Like, ooh, boy, that is, you are leaving you are almost asking the football gods to screw you over and really test the waters of what you just got out of this 6th round pick now in serious regular play. Like, that is not something you want to do. You want to put yourself in a position when it comes to the immediate where you are better off than what you currently are in the break glass in case of emergency department. And that doesn't exist right now on the Bills roster at that position.
So we've talked about linebacker, edge, receiver, and defensive tackle. I think the next position that comes to mind is safety. Now, the Bills have done some things at safety this offseason. They brought back Damar Hamlin. They brought in Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I think that they're in a position now, even with Jordan Hancock still on the roster as kind of that guy you're grooming, where they could go through this entire draft and not take a safety, and I wouldn't be stunned because the numbers make sense. You have your starters with Bishop and Johnson. You have your young guy you're grooming in Hancock, and then you have your break glass in case of emergency guy who's been here in Damar Hamlin. So I feel like the Bills probably like the numbers they have at safety, but I still think there's room here for somebody who could be a difference maker. Or if you get to the point where maybe you only have 13 or 14 first round grades, but you get to pick 26 and somebody's there. Is there a safety, Luka? And just looking at this class here, I think everybody would agree that the best safety in this class is Caleb Downs. Yeah. But beyond that,
it could even be the best player in this draft.
He sure could. Beyond that, I think that I would say about a month ago, it was up for conversation who the second or third best safety was, but it does feel like some separation has happened. And Dylan Thieneman from Oregon has really gained some steam. Yeah. Is he somebody that you would consider at pick 26 if he was still there?
Yes, absolutely. I will also add the asterisk right out the gate. He will not be there at 26.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking too.
Yeah, he is. I said it, I believe, in our, hey, we're shifting to the draft focus. And depending on how we do our mock draft episode, where we pick when, I'll even leach this into your brain. He is destined to be a Minnesota Viking. It just feels like just a perfect match. And if I had to guess, there's always one draft pick every year, Josh, and all our mocks document this. There's one where I go, this guy is destined for here, and it feels like my hit rate has been pretty damn good on that. Dylan Thieneman to the Minnesota Vikings at 18 is just going to happen. It feels like I don't see how it doesn't. It just makes more sense to than to not to. But if he was there at 26 for the Bills, 1000%, I would feel that is a quality pick for the Bills to take on that individual. Yes.
Okay. Well, if the Bills don't go safety at 26, is there anybody else at 26 out of safety that you would consider?
Before the combine, Emmanuel McNeil Warren was an individual that intrigued me. After the combine and pro days, which I do think helped and hurt him, I don't think it makes sense overall for the Bills to take him. And I would say that because I just think he's not what they would be looking for, as well as I just have a little bit more questions as to what he will be capable of in the NFL. And that's not something I think they need to be doing at the safety position at pick 26. So realistically, no, I think the only two guys you're going to take at 26, not that you're going to get one for sure, is Caleb Downs and Thieneman. But overall, yeah, it's one of those ones where I don't think safety is something you're addressing at 26. But I will say I would have a heavy interest in certain individuals in the third round for sure at safety, as we can go into it. But I'll let you name some guys first, honestly, because I'm curious where you're at with it.
So it's funny. I actually have 3 guys that all went to the same school that I like.
Okay. Well, we'll share a brain on one then. Yeah, I know where you're going now, but I think we'll share a brain on one.
University of Arizona. So one of them, depending on where you're looking, is going to be
Yeah.
listed as either a safety or a cornerback. Let me get my notes up here because I just pulled it out again. But I'm going to start off first with somebody that I think is really specifically just a single high safety, but I really loved watching him, and is Genesis Smith. Now, this to me is a guy that he complements Cole Bishop well. If you view Cole Bishop as more of that robber, the underneath safety, Genesis Smith to me has the athleticism to play deep. You would not have to take him day one, probably not even day two. This is somebody that you start off on day three and you feel like, man, we may have added somebody that can compete with Jordan Hancock, and maybe give him a run for his money as the young safety on the roster. Um, Beyond that, though, a guy that really stands out to me, and the problem is he played cornerback at at Arizona. It's Tredan Stukes. I always want to say Stokes, but Tredan Stukes. But he really last season the Seahawks kind of made over their team with taking Emin Roy in the second round. I'm not saying that's who this is, but what I am saying is the flexibility he gives teams with his ability to play nickel, to play single high, to impact the run game, to also get you out of a game at boundary. And I think he can be an impact player. It interests me. There's versatility there. And I do think, despite the fact that the Bills went out and addressed this need in free agency, I think the Bills still need to find their Taron Johnson of the future. Now, I don't think that, again, this is not somebody you're taking on day one. Maybe you're looking at this guy in the third round. But Stukes is a guy that I think a former defensive back like Jim Leonard could really, really fall in love with his versatility. You can move him all over the alignment. You can play him at nickel. He can even blitz a little bit. I think this is a guy that Jim Leonard could have fun with as a chess piece. And this to me would be a Jim Leonard's pounding the table for a player on day three, and the Bills give him his wish. I'm not even sure where he would slot in. I would think it would be competing at nickel, but I think he could. I think he could compete at safety, and I think he's a much better prospect than Jordan Hancock was. So that's somebody that jumps out to me right away.
Yeah, I'm gonna just say this now. That school down south, they do have some intriguing safety corner hybrid prospects. You brought up Genesis Smith. You brought up what's
Stukes.
his name? Dukes. Thank you. I mean Dalton Johnson, for what it's worth, is another individual out of that crappy school. That overall, there's actually a lot I like about him. Except for the place that he decided to play football. But overall, I think what's funny about him is this past season, it's like he finally figured out how to play coverage. And all of a sudden you're like, oh crap, someone that understands run fits and run assignments now actually knows how to not get picked on in the pass game. This is a problem. So he's someone though that I would say, funny enough, you brought up Hancock. He has that Hancock vibe to him where it's like, I'd be very intrigued on a late pick with a Dalton Johnson that maybe you could do something similar to what you had with Hancock and just also throw him in the mix and see if he figures it out, because I think Hancock's a larger individual slightly, but again, similar style game to them that pops off a little bit. I'm going to go a little bit higher end with a couple names here, and then I'll do a dart throw. But what I loved seeing out of the Bills' top 30 visits was an individual, AJ Halsey, out of LSU. I like him a lot. I think he is potentially the second or third best coverage safety in this draft. Caleb Downs is above everyone else. So let's just get that out of the way. So Dylan Thieneman, as much as I like him, I think AJ Halsey maybe as a pure coverage safety, but more responsible, even better. His capabilities in coverage feel incredible. That if you're looking to put someone in the pipeline that can both make plays for you now while also play that nickel slot as well as safety and then move him around in coverage, he is everything you want. I think his run defending and stuff like that still okay. It's just the coverage level to him is premier, that I like a lot about him. And then also, I have just always been a little bit of a Kamari Ramsey guy. He's someone that I think fell down a little bit due to an injustice to himself. And that's just mainly because USC's DBs had a very tough time remaining fit. And if you really watch it, he kind of was just dealing with a lot of individuals around him where there was inconsistencies and therefore blown coverages and stuff like that, of course. That I just think he's also another one of those guys, though, where I think his coverage capabilities are great. I think he has some nickel and slot corner capabilities to him, but overall, just from a coverage safety perspective, I think he's a lot. And also, just on top of it all, Ramsey is a like just true bona fide professional, I guess is the way I'd put it. It just feels like he's got a headiness for the game. He understands, what's going on pre-snap, and he's always reading the quarterback in his capabilities and what he's doing. That there's a lot that I like about him. He reminds me a lot of like a Kirby Joseph individual that when it comes to day 2, maybe even early day 3, he's a name that I've kind of highlighted and circled there. It's just my one dart throw, I would say, an individual to just kind of keep an eye on. I mean, I did name Dalton Johnson, I will say, and Dalton Johnson, when it comes to dart throws, he could not even be drafted potentially, which, hey, that school could use as little amount of draft picks as possible. But another individual, though, that I do like is Lewis Moore. I will say the reason I like Lewis Moore is just he was a lot of fun to watch. It just there's nothing about his game particularly or even his measurables or anything like that that stands out, but then all of a sudden he just pops all the time and he's a lot of fun. He's a jack of all, not exceptional at any individual style kind of to his game, but I think there's just something about the way he was playing and the way you'd watch him that I'm like, I could easily see him being someone that if all in all works out and you're drafting him, let's say in the 6th round, he could be someone that surprises at camp, stands out, makes some splash plays, and next thing you know, carves out a position on this roster that really fills everything about him. I enjoyed anytime I watched Indiana. I just felt like you saw Lewis Moore a little bit more than it felt like what he truly is. You should be noticing him, and that to me is something that doesn't go quietly. I think when you are trying to watch other players and all of a sudden this guy pops out from time to time, that is something to take note of, write down, and understand as a guy who could potentially be a surprise or someone, especially when you then go to see where they stand and everything. And for what it's worth, the place that I like to have, have it written down. The average pick for this individual is 240. So it's like, yeah, I mean, there's a reason, he's ranked 240th on average on people's boards. It's like, okay, why do I seem to like him a little bit more than your average individual? Just someone that popped on tape a little bit. I like him a little bit. I think Lewis Moore is another dart throw that I would say just keep an eye on because he might be able to be a little bit something at the next level.
One last guy I want to mention, I'm curious if you have an opinion on him too, because I came away loving him, but there's a lot of detractors too, is from South Carolina, Jalen Kilgore. He's got like a round 3, round 4 projection. His college career is fascinating. So I previously mentioned, I always struggle with his name, and he's excellent. Nick Emenrory from the Seahawks. He got injured in Kilgore's freshman year, and Kilgore came on the field and got All-American freshman honors, and they never took him off the field after that. He has first-round athletic traits. His athleticism absolutely pops off the charts. I think you feel good about him being a nickel in the NFL, but he just doesn't have a whole lot of like single high experience. I think the NFL is projecting him as a safety. It's a projection. But man, again, Luka, like we talk about all the time, the Bills have so much B+ talent on this team. You get to the 3rd round of the draft, and it's Kilgore versus, say, a guard. Take a swing. That's where I'm at. What do you think about this player?
Yes, athleticism, stuff like that. I think they are. It's funny when you look at South Carolina in general. If you see a name that is from South Carolina last season, this season, and next season, I will tell you this. You do not need to question if they're a raw athlete because guess what? They are an athlete. They have a roster full of these freaks, and there are some premier athletes as well on top of it all that will be high-end NFL guys. But then you have guys such as this when we're talking about Jalen Kilgore, where it's like, yes, the athleticism's there. What I will say is this. Do I think he can be a slot nickel corner in this league? Yes. What I think the problem is he gets beat a lot in coverage from shifty, capable receivers in that position. And where his strength is shedding blocks, making tackles, and defending the run. And that's something where can the Bills use that? Absolutely, of course. It's another situation where I'm like, boy, this would have been a really good McDermott slot corner replacement kind of guy. Where it's like, I think he has the size. He's not a Taron Johnson big boy size, but he's not small by any means. He's athletic. And where he primarily dominates is being that nickel style player that can dominate in run defending and willingly tackling anything in front of him. I think there was one game where he was like 3 tackles for loss, 10 plus tackles last season. Like, he was just absolutely wrecking the game from that slot position. That's great. It's where the caveat to it all is I would probably have highlighted him more if we were still in a McDermott regime. And now that we've shifted a little bit from a defensive side of things, I don't know if he necessarily fits what they're trying to do there. But I will share the idea of, if they were to take him in, the 3rd, 4th round, I love the idea because you're drafting an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just make him work now? And that's great, because especially 3rd round and later, I feel like if you're questioning between what feels like a quality, heady football player that lacks a little bit of that speed and size and stuff like that, but then you have a guy where it's like, does he necessarily understand the game to the level you want? No, but he's fast, twitchy, size through the roof. It's like, I'd rather go with the athlete, because I want to say that I trust myself to be able to coach the things out of or into this individual. And he's that, as we've said before in years past, he's that ball of clay that you want to mold into whatever it is. And he at least has the things you can't coach. He has the things you can't put into him. That is size, speed, and just athleticism overall, that you either have it or you don't. So I don't hate the idea at all, especially when it comes to what we're talking about in this player as to where they're going to go. It's you're getting someone that, hey, 4.4 flats, over 6 foot, over 200 pounds, things like those measurables where you're like, yes. The only problem is maybe between the ears, it's not quite there yet when it comes to coverage capabilities, and things like that, which, hey, bring them in-house, mold them. We're talking about guys you're putting in the cupboard, putting in the organization, and you are going to try to develop into quality players. And you're not trying to get something and expect something out of this player from day one once they're in-house.
And it makes you, when you look at Nick Amenwore, what he did for the Seahawks, what made him such a cheat code is he allowed them to stay in nickel against base formations because he was so good against the run. Could a player like this come in and be so physical against the run, even as a 6th defensive back on the field, or 5th defensive back on the field, give your team the versatility to stay in nickel against those base sets, and then really make it hard to throw and to run on you? That's what you'd be hoping for. I don't think you'd get that year one, because Luka did mention some of the coverage limitations. Would you want him covering a Lad McConkey out of the slot, or, a Puka Nacua or Devon? No. But that's what you're hoping you get 2-3 years down the line. All right, Luka. Anything else we need to cover for the draft perspective? I think we've hit the heavy hitters for the Bills. I know you wanted to talk about punter at some point, but
No.
we're about 100 minutes into this episode, this megasode. Anything else that we should get into before we get out of here?
The last little caveat is, we didn't talk about this position because it just feels like maybe that's not where they're going to go. But I will say this. It feels like there might be a scenario, if you were to ask me what the second most likely position is that they're taking at 26, that it would be offensive tackle. I think there could be potentially some offensive tackles there at 26 that you might have a back end 1st round grade on, and then you're projecting to what your trade back scenario would look like. And overall, based on where some of the early guys are going to go, if they, for whatever reason, fall 1 or 2 spots, like, I will say this, Spencer Fanow out of Utah, my favorite tackle prospect in this year's draft. He might even be one of my more favorite tackle prospects, similar to, he's not like a Joe Alt per se, but he is a phenomenal, he could do everything. Feels like he's going to be a premier tackle in this league. I saw a couple mocks out there and a couple big boards where they're having him outside the top 5, 6 and stuff. If you see a guy of his capability fall down a little bit, which inadvertently trickles down the rest of the tackles, and you can get a guy like Caleb Lomu out of Utah as well, which for what it's worth, the best tackle pair in college football last year were those two individuals, and they were phenomenal tackles. I don't think it's out of the question that someone like a position like that would be off the table at 26. And there are guys there that I think are worthy of that pick for what it's worth as well. That, there's even like this could be a year where it's the first time in a long time a couple Arizona State players get in the first round because there's a potential for Max Ian Acor out of Arizona State. I think he is a back end first round or most likely, in my opinion, second round tackle in this draft. That I don't think the Bills would be in on him, but he's just another name that could be out there that if he's taken, but that caused someone else to fall overall, I could absolutely see tackle being in play for the Bills just as kind of the outside perspective looking in, just value plays could potentially be there.
Yeah, and there's been some concern about Deion Dawkins regressing.
Yeah.
I think the Bills can still get a few good years out of Deion Dawkins. They're going to have to because he's a source of where they can still recoup some money against the salary cap with restructures in the future. They need him to be good for the next couple of years. Fanow is an interesting prospect, not for the Bills, but where does he slot in the NFL? Because there's a lot of people that think he could be a guard, and this is the kind of class where you might see somebody that's a tackle projecting the guard go in the top 10 because he A is that good, and B, there's just not a lot of top end talent in this draft. So take what you know. And I think people feel really good about him being a very good player. All right, Luka, I got some breaking news during this podcast. Stokes will be joining us during our live show. Good to have him on there. But we are not done with draft prep. We have another episode coming out next week, which is maybe our favorite episode of the year outside of the live draft show, which is our mock draft episode. So, Luka, do you want to just do this on the air? Or are you going to be evens or odds this year?
See, I'll probably be odds because I do believe the Cardinals are 3, right? I want to say the Cardinals are 3. So I normally always lean to it where it's like I want to be the Cardinals, but at the same time, I want to put my stamp on number 18 there. That's what makes me upset because I like being right, as we all know. No, I'll be odds. I will let you be evens.
Okay. All right. Evens it is. Mock draft episode coming out next week. This is not an episode, I'm going to tell you folks now, where Luka and I just read ESPN, read Pro Football Talk, and we just go with whatever they're saying. We take a lot of pride in being right. We take in a lot of information from the beat writers and reports and podcasts of other teams. We reach out to people we know that follow these teams closely. We take a lot of pride in being right. And I think it's maybe our most competitive episode.
Yes.
But yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah. It's the 1 week of the year or even more where we actually don't take in Bills content. We're doing everything other than Bills content when it comes to NFL content. Because like we said, we like being right. And especially like last year's draft show where I think we hit on 5 or 6 picks exactly. Mm-hmm. And most notably the Tet McMillan one that people were not quite seeing, but at the same time, it's like, I'm telling you right now, Tet McMillan is a Panther. It's going to happen. Yeah, we love this, QJ going to the Chargers. We want to get these right because it makes even our live show more entertaining when Josh hits it or I hit it. And it's like, here we go. We know what we're doing, or at least we like to think we know what we're doing.
Well, and it works out well for us for the live show because so much of the live show is watching other teams draft until the Bills pick. And now we have this built-in research we've done, which helps us on the show. Yep. So that'll be fun. But for Luka, I am Josh McCarty, and we will talk to you next week, draft week, on Bills Chat.